With the topic of change, there's a couple of areas in human experience that are pretty difficult to handle in terms of applying spiritual principle. And to me, the two most difficult ones are the area of human relations, which will also involve change, and change itself. When either we're expecting something to happen that doesn't, or we are not expecting something to happen and it does, we kind of lose our point of reference, because what we do through life is we use all of the I guess the outer circumstances as kind of a point of reference, where we get up every day and we see the same things. We may not always like the fact that we're, maybe our life feels like that movie Groundhog Day, and with, who was the Murray? Bill Murray, yeah. I thought that was a pretty good movie, but a little crass in some areas, but we can have that kind of a feeling where, and in another way, where that's kind of an anchor to us, where we get up and we see the same things, and maybe we're not really happy with it, but at least it's familiar, and so we know how we'll go through the day, and then anything outside of that is something that we deal with in a fairly easy way. But if we get up one morning and all of those signposts are different, that they don't exist anymore, then that throws us into quite a tailspin. And we may think that our life doesn't feel like it's in divine order. Maybe we've been affirming that. Maybe we have been praying for divine order, and it just seems to get worse and worse, that there's no order at all. But it is important. I think it was Oliver Wendell, what was his home? Yeah, somebody said, no, it was Cromwell, his last name's Cromwell, that a man never rises so high as to when he knows not where he's going. And none of us like to be in that position. I don't like to be in that position. But what's interesting about it is we shift our trust, in time at least, from those material signposts that we've been looking at to our own spirit. And that's where the peace is, because those external things can be changed, they can be destroyed, they can be altered in ways that no longer give us that sense of security and peace and all of that. And we're all familiar with the saying from The Sound of Music, when a door closes, a window opens. That's always a comforting thing to think about in a time of change. We can't always see that happening. But that's where the spiritual thing comes in. When one way is blocked, apparently being blocked, another is open or opening. And we don't see that. It's not a physical signpost yet, so we don't see it. And it's very difficult to have faith that an answer is unfolding, or that something higher or something better is unfolding. And so we can get sucked into the appearance of the thing and feel like our whole life is collapsing. But that's what the spiritual thing is about. It's the thought of Jesus, that I'm in this world but not of it. My kingdom is not of this world. He's referring to a level in all of us that is not affected by appearances. And that is something that we're not all familiar with. We're familiar with it in theory. We're familiar with it by what we read about, the spiritual principles and so on. But there is this underlying thing that once we touch it, or when we touch it in a time of change, that's where we find our peace. And it takes a while to get to that place sometimes. Again, because our trust has been in the signpost, has been in the getting up in the routine and all of the stuff that we go through every day. That changes, and suddenly our world looks quite different. But it's at times like these that we need to pull ourselves back And I've said many times, we're all human, and we're not going to do this successfully right off the bat, probably ever. We get better at it. And we're certainly good when it's someone else going through a time of change, and they're telling us about it. They're telling us how frantic they are, and we say, you'll be okay, this will be fine. Because we're on the outside of that looking in. And it's very comforting to say that to other people. Sometimes, they don't believe it at that moment. It feels like a platitude, and it may be it, but it is true. And it's a very valuable thing to be able to do for others when they're going through a time of change. You think of a time where you were knocked off your feet and didn't know exactly what to do. It was always those voices comforting you, saying it'll be okay. This too shall pass. I think that's a great affirmation, a very simple thing, that life is moving all the time, and that whatever we're going through today, it will not be here tomorrow. It'll be resolved. We'll be in a different place. And but again, while that's happening, and it can happen for some time, you can go through changes that maybe last years, times of uncertainty. They can last a long time. And it's difficult if you can imagine being, in one of the wars where you're under persecution or something, in ways we can hardly even imagine. And every day you get up and that's what it is. That's your reality. And every day you're hoping that something will change, and it doesn't change. And it just keeps going. And there have been Viktor Frankl, wrote a book about that. He was a prisoner of war in Germany, and he ended up writing a book that is very spiritually inspiring. He found a level of experience in himself that most of us never have to even try to find, under circumstances that we can't even comprehend. And he watched all this horrible stuff going on around him and was able to find his own Christ, his own spiritual self, and actually get to the point where it was okay with him, whatever direction his life went, if he was killed or if he lived, if he survived. And he did not seem to carry resentment after he was released, after that period, as it would be so easy to do, to not forget, and to see what people can do to people. It's pretty horrific sometimes. But to go through that and then be able to, because he found his real source of power. And you talk about a change, going from a normal life into a prison camp, and just the horrors of that. So people have done all kinds of things. They've gone through all kinds of changes that we can't even hardly grasp, and the change that we're involved in, whatever change we're involved in our life, seems very small. Well, it's not small, because it's yours. It's your life, it's your experience. So where does the spiritual stuff come in? And that is the question we're asking today. It's just a thing that we have to keep forefront in our minds. The window that opens, the window we're talking about here, is as close as your own mind. And in the case of Viktor Frankl, just think of that. What changed in him? What allowed him to go through the experience of captivity, torture, suffering, starvation, squalor, living in squalor, just all of the deprivation that he would be in? What changed that allowed him to see something higher? It was not something in circumstances. That's what we usually look for. And there's nothing wrong with looking there, but if the circumstance is our source of power, then our source of power can be taken from us. It's not ours. It belongs to the world. It's the kingdom of the world. The window is as close as your own mind. The closed door represents a known path. It's that getting up every day and saying, here's my life. It's a way, it's a certain state of affairs that we've grown accustomed to. That gets upset, but we still have our mind, we still have this thing, and sometimes it's good for the mind to be upset, to get stirred up, so that we can put our priorities in order. The nature of life is change, and we all say that all the time. It's, again, it's a lot better when it's somebody else going through it. But the nature of life is change. We're going through a change right now, a change of season. And that's, we welcome that because it's a nice change of season. But what about when it starts getting colder, when the snow starts blowing in, and do we like that so much? Some of us go somewhere else, when that happens. But the nature of life is change, yet when change occurs, when a familiar door closes, we're all prone to fall into bouts of fear and uncertainty as to the outcome of our future. And again, why is this? It's because we've grown accustomed to life as it looks on the outside, and as long as all that life is in place, we're fine. But it's when that gets moved or challenged somewhat that our spiritual training must kick in. And we all have it. Even if you are tired of hearing cliches on how you should handle change in your life, what will happen through a time of change is that you'll go through all of the cliches, and none of those will quite suffice. But then you'll come to yourself. You're the prodigal son out in the far country who's reached the limit. He comes to himself. And that's where the change occurs. That's where the important source of power is discovered. It's your own. It must be our own. And I have emphasized that over the years, the spiritual thing must be our own. We tend to think of all of this as, people have gone before us, they've learned, they've meditated for hours, they've written books about it, and that's the body of knowledge about the spiritual path. And so we read as much about it as we can. But none of that does us any good when we ourselves are going through the change. It's what we implement. It's what we know. It's what we awaken to in ourselves that matters. That's the only thing that matters. Very early in my life, I've told the story many times, I was reading a book by Charles Fillmore because I was frustrated with my spiritual progress or lack of spiritual progress, and reading his words, which normally would be inspiring, actually had the opposite effect. They were aggravating. It's like, I can't get this stuff. I don't know why it's so difficult. If I'm being called by God, can't God do something? Can't you do something to help me wake up, to have a deeper experience? Why do I have to struggle? Why is this such a struggle that I'm going through? Why can't I let go of something I know is not true? Why can't I let go of something that I know is very surface, that will change? Why is that so difficult? I'm asking myself that question. Was asking myself that question, and it was very frustrating. And I threw the book down, and that was probably one of the best moves I've ever made in a case like that. It's like you throw the book down, now you're on your own. And God's saying, I think maybe you're getting it, finally. You're getting closer, you're getting warmed up here. And that's what it's about. And the books are great. The instruction we get is great, but we tend to think of the knowledge is out there someplace. It's a big pile of information that all these seers and mystics have put together. And I expose myself to that. I have somewhat exposed myself to that, but it's not mine. It's theirs. But the reason they wrote those books, the reason that they have had these experiences is because the time came where they stepped off their own cliff. They stepped off into their own life, and they began to worship their own God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your mind. That's the first commandment that Jesus pointed out when somebody said, what are the important commandments? Love the Lord your God, not the God of the mystics or the Christian movement or the whatever, the Buddhists or whoever. Love the Lord your God. Do I even know the Lord my God? What I have always found is I am always closest to that when I don't know what to do. When my head doesn't know what to do, I start listening to my heart. That is the intuitive side. Have you noticed that? Do you do that? Am I alone in doing that? I don't think so. It's not like taking a driver's test. I just got my drone pilot, what do they call it, unmanned aircraft license. And I studied for that, I don't know, a couple of months or so, learning things I'll never use, the rest of my life. But you have to know that information in order to go into an office and answer 60 questions in order to pass. I got a 93, I think, %, which was pretty good, they thought. But I don't remember any of it, hardly, now. And it's like, that's information, and you got to have it to get through that test, but do you have to have it to live your life? You don't. And how much of the information do we take in on a spiritual level? It's good information. But how much of it are we actually applying? That's the thing, because I think we tend to think that if I get enough information, I won't have to have a problem. I won't have problems in my life anymore. Or when they come, I'll just handle them quite well. Well, they come in ways we're not expecting. They knock us off our feet. And so we didn't read that chapter. We didn't read the chapter about how do you handle that one. So it's not our knowledge, it's not our information. So you got this thing that knocks you off your feet, and what you're poised to do is get your own information. Go within yourself and find your center of power. That's always what happens if you allow yourself to go that far. And this, I'm not saying that we don't draw comfort from other people and books and all. I think there's always a place for that. There will always be a place for that. But it's important that to make this ours. Love the Lord your God. Worship the Lord your God. When you hear those words, if your mind is like mine, it goes back 2,000 years. What does that mean? Does it really mean something that is living and alive here now, working through me at this moment? Or is it a body of faith-based ideas that I am struggling to embrace? Is it a living, organic thing? Is my faith here? Or is it in a thing? Is my faith stronger when everything works out, or does my faith become stronger when my life is a mess? When you look at yourself, you will answer the latter, that when your life is a mess, that's when your faith kicks in. That's when you find your strength. Often we are buffered from having to use our strength because things are going well. And I think that's one of the problems with prosperity. It's like if you can solve all of your problems with money, and I'm not saying that's wrong. Well, I'm not saying, no, I'm saying something else. If that's the source of your character, then there's going to be a time when money won't solve the problem that you have. It can't. All the money in the world can't solve it. So you're there alone. And it's not just money, it's, there are people that treat friends like money. I don't solve anything on my own, I contact all my friends, and they give me strength, and they give me encouragement and all. But what if your friends aren't there? What if there's a time when your friends aren't there? You find your own strength, you find your own center when things are taken away, when you lose. I think that's what Jesus was talking about, that when you lose your life, you gain it. It's losing the things you believe are the source of your power, that you actually gain your real power. And this is not advocating that, it's good to suffer. Poverty is a virtue of some kind. It's not saying that at all. I think when Jesus talked to the rich young man that came to him and said, "What must I do to gain eternal life?" and he gave him several things, go do the commandments and do this and that. And the man said, "Well, I do all that. What am I lacking?" And so Jesus at that point said, "Sell everything you own. Pry your fingers off that as your identity and follow me or become real. Find your source of power." He was not advocating poverty. He just saw that this guy, his whole identity was in what he had, not in who he was. He didn't have power. He never would experience this sense of eternal life because his life consisted of what he had, not who he was. And that's the shift he's advocating. But there are people that will argue that, wealth is the money's the source of all evil. Well, I think Paul actually said the love of money is the source of all evil. And what that means, in my mind at least, the love of money is I have to have something to create my power. I don't have it myself. I have to have something outside of myself. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be just money. It doesn't have to be just friends. It could be just keeping your life going the same direction without any interruptions. But when that gets messed up, when the wrench is thrown into that whole thing, that's when you find your source of power. And it's not comfortable. It's one of the most uncomfortable things that we can possibly do, is have our world so upset that nothing looks familiar. And all of the things that we have counted on to give us peace are gone. And that's when we find true peace. It's when all things are taken away. And again, this is not advocating that we've got to strip ourselves of luxuries or any amenities we have in life that are nice. We all want nice things. We don't want to have to worry about shelter and food and clothing, all that kind of stuff. And there's so many other ways we can lose our peace of mind, other than having those things threatened. But every one of them will take us into a deeper level of ourselves if we're open to that, and that's what we want to do. So the nature of life is changed when change occurs, when a familiar door closes, we are prone to fall into bouts of fear and uncertainty as to the outcome of our future. That's true. It's sort of our knee-jerk reaction. So we observe how we're handling that. If we want to, see how we're doing on the scale of spiritual development. I like what Thomas Troward says here. You have to think about a lot of what Troward says. He's kind of complex sometimes, but he says the individual's subjective mind is his own innermost self. Think of that, your real self, your subjective mind. Its first care is the maintenance of the individuality of which it is the foundation. In other words, the soul is all about self-preservation, that it knows how to do that. You're in a crisis, you feel like something important is being taken away. Your soul is saying, nothing important is being taken away. I'm still here. Your power is still here. Shift your trust from that to me. That's what it's saying. That's what Troward is saying here, I think. That's how I interpret it anyway. Its first care is the maintenance of the individuality, your true essence, of which it is the foundation. The challenges of life are, in a sense, designed to get us back to ourselves, bring us back home, so we can say the thing that I trusted is not trustworthy. The gods have clay feet. that there is something that is in me that is greater than that which is in the world. And that's what I'm being guided to. That's what I'm being guided to look at. There is in you a built-in wisdom that knows how to navigate through the fog of uncertainty. It is your innermost self, which is the direct offspring of infinite mind or God. And again, we often actually cover that up with our spiritual knowledge, with our spiritual information. Because we're getting, you read something, it inspires you. Where's that inspiration coming from? Is it coming from within, or is it coming from the book? The book is a reminder, and it's, again, an important reminder. But so often that's enough for us. Okay, I've got my daily dose, I've got my fix. So I put the book down, go about my business, try to remember all day long what I read and bring that back into play whenever necessary. But have I really crossed over into my center of power? Do I really know everything's okay? Have I really gotten to that point? Or do I go through my day and I begin to wane, and so I go get the book again and get my fix? And I don't want to put that down. I've written a number of books, and I hope you buy all of them for your friends and family and pass them around and all of that. But I know that I can't give you through writing or even through talking or through any way whatsoever the thing that you really want and the thing that you really need. We're all looking for ourselves. I can remind you of that. You can remind me of that. But that touching that real self, that deeper self in our times of change, that's what gives us the peace. You've all been there. You've all been in things where your life is falling apart, but suddenly you find that place in yourself where you know everything's okay. And it's a wonderful feeling. And nothing on the outer may change at all. But you know that something is there, something's real, and you're fine. There's in you a built-in wisdom that knows how to navigate through these foggy times. It's your own soul. It's your own innermost self. And that never leaves us. I was talking to a woman one time who had, I think her husband had fallen off a horse and ended up dying. Just a total unexpected shock. You can imagine some of you have been through something like this. And it was devastating to her, but when I talked to her, she was talking about how she'd gone through all of that, but had been able to let it go, like not just stay there in that place. It's like, okay, that was a world I was familiar with my husband, and that changed. And she could have easily just, latched onto that time of how great things were and how much she had lost. But she said she was able to let it go, and we think that's some form of disrespect, and it's not. If I was the one who fell off the horse and was going on, I would want everybody I left behind to get on with their life. I wouldn't want them to be so riveted on me and the loss that it ruins the rest of their life. I'd want them to let go of me. Not forget me, but let go. Let go enough to be able to get on with life. So she did that, and she met someone else, and it was like, and got remarried, and her life was, as she talked about it, she would come to tears. Very moving. It's like, okay, that happened, and she went through this change, found her center, and a new life unfolded from that. And that's what we can think of it, and it's difficult when we have losses, when we have changes, to even imagine what could possibly come out of this. And that was one thing she said, is I could never have imagined what would unfold after that. But she then had a life that was just as beautiful. She was just as thankful, very grateful. You may not relish this idea, but you are most alive in your moments of uncertainty. You think? Not necessarily happiest, but we're most alive. The vigor of youth rekindles in your heart. You notice that? It's like when you're thrown out, it's like somebody throwing you in a pool and you don't know how to swim. You think you're not going to come alive? I actually had that happen at a camp. Today I could have sued the guy, but I wouldn't. The portals of creativity reopen in your mind, allowing you to think outside the box of appearances. And the reason you can think outside the box of appearances probably is because the box has been destroyed. You're not in the box anymore. And so it's either sink or swim. And there's something in us that comes alive when we don't know what to do. And it's a pretty, and we avoid that like the plague. None of us want to be there. None of us want to be in the position where we don't know what to do. And again, I'm not advocating that, but if you're in such a place, it's not the end of the world. It's probably the beginning. And it is, when all is said and done, when all of the smoke passes, the fog lifts. And you know the fog always lifts. I've been in many fog storms or whatever. We don't have too many here. But in the Midwest, fog is a way of life. And it's dangerous. You can't see. I mean, it's so thick that if you're driving a car and you have your lights on, the light reflects right off the fog in front of you, and it is dangerous. You cannot see. But then you can drive down that same road in a couple of hours, and it's blue sky, just absolutely beautiful. And that's the way life is. You know, it's foggy some days, and you say, what am I doing wrong? I need to learn more about this spiritual stuff. But fog happens. You've seen the bumper stickers. You know, I'm not going to repeat what the bumper stickers say, but you know what I'm talking about because you all think that too. But fog happens. And what else happens? The fog lifts. That's always part of it. So hold that thought, you know, whatever the change may be. If you are currently reeling from a closed door, begin now to affirm that your mind is open to new possibilities. Let go of what is past, knowing that something even better is opening for you. And that's pretty exciting when you think about it. So you've got a door that's shut, you don't know what to do, it's, you know, foggy. To just hold this idea that life is still moving, life is still working, life is still good. Right? All right, pretty easy. Let's do that this week and come back and tell me how this has helped you, because I always like to hear from you. I haven't heard from you guys lately, so let me hear some stuff from you. How's this helping your life? Because it's really helps me to know that I'm not up here just talking to myself, although I am just talking to myself. All right? Thanks for coming out.
You've been watching a talk presented at the Unity Church of Grand Junction by Reverend Doug Bator. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Also, please feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested or benefit from this message. If this video brought value to your life, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below to our PayPal donation account. Thanks again so much for watching.